But then people will see the dial and they'll be like, oh my God, what is that? The moment you posted it, I'm like, that's the one I'm looking for, like whatever it is, like I'm good with it.
People have asked me like,
yeah,
what do you have to do to get a Journe these days? So how has the process been like? What was it like getting this first allocation?
That mix to them is really, really, really important.
So would you say that's like a critical component to like getting them to give you a watch?
It's huge.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Adam here from Menta Watches. We are joined by a recurring guest, my dear friend, Mr. Drew Coblitz, at Coblitz on Instagram. Give him a follow. We will link his information below in the description. Last time you were here was like, what, a year and a half ago? Yeah.
A year and something.
We will also link that video here, which will be up on the top of the screen if guy does his job right for you to watch. Drew popped in today to take a look at some watches, and so we figured we would catch up and see where the state of affairs has been in the past year for him and his collecting journey. He's got some new awesome watches that he did not have before.
Correct.
Done some really good damage in the past year.
Yeah.
Kudos to you,
yeah,
sir.
It's good.
So how's life been, regardless?
Life is incredible.
Nice.
Overall, yeah, absolutely. Aside from like having my noise canceling headphones on for everyone's politics, aside from that, Watch World has been phenomenal.
Luckily, we stick to watches here. We stick to watches. Please keep it.
I mean, everything's been awesome. I got into Miami about a month ago for the 4 or 5 watch and car events over the past bit. So
it's been busy down here, right?
It gets more and more busy every year, and that's why like going back and forth from Philly to here 5 or 6 times costs more money than to stay down here for a couple months.
Well,
flat out.
We're going to talk about some of the events because they correspond to some of the watches that you have in there.
Yeah.
Let's start with the watch that is vintage. We'll start with the one vintage new acquisition you got.
Yeah.
I know the watch very well because I really didn't want to sell it to him. It came out of my personal collection. This guy harassed me. He didn't harass me, but like once a month he'd check in and be like, hey, you ready to sell it? And I'd be like, no.
It was a
pulse check.
It was a pulse
check.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can sneak it out here. So what we have is a reference 1016 gilt dial Explorer from the mid 1960s. But the thing about this watch is it is the most stunning shade of tropical I've ever seen one aged. Quick refresher, tropical means that the lacquer that was used in the dial aged naturally from black to brown. It was a defect in the paint. Rolex actually considered it to be a defect and would throw away these dials when they came in for service. Over the years, collectors really started to admire them because it's almost like a work of art.
Yeah.
You know, kind of everyone ages differently. Some, you know, lighter shades like this one with this caramel brown color, some darker. Really interesting stuff. This watch was, to me, a very fresh, barn find watch, perfect condition, like 10 out of 10, unpolished case, original bracelet with the correct date code, everything amazing on this watch. So what was it about this watch that had you texting me all the time?
I mean, it's simple in the sense that I knew I wanted a tropical because I didn't have anything like that. The vintage stuff that I've had previously was all like phenomenal condition, like perfect, or you know, untouched, and also what kind of looks, you know, perfect for that. But I wanted a tropical because it just has a little bit more soul to it. Like just an extra bit of, it's just different. And I'm not huge into art, but flat out, I was like, this is kind of the closest to like art on wrist you're gonna get, because you have a time, you have a chemistry, and then you just have a rarity factor of there's only so much, you know, so many of them that were made during that time that are also nice. You posted that and I was like, all right, that is the exact shade that I love. I like the transitional, so it's not just like all tropical, like you have like, it's like eclipse-ish or, you know, something in the
it's
order.
like a gradient from like caramel brown to like darker on the
and like
side.
It shows that transition, which I like, versus like it looks like it was like just dunked in. And then that like the dial looks smooth, like it literally looks like caramel, versus some of the other ones like the 6.2, 6.5 like Daytonas, and some of those where the subdials kind of look slightly powdery. It's not bad, it's just really like the moment you posted it, I'm like, that's the one I'm looking for, like whatever it is, like I'm good with it.
Well, they look powdery because you're talking about like a matte finish, and it's more grenades. It's much different. This is because of the lacquer that they use. It has that gloss or mirror like finish, so it'll get that like caramel sheen to it.
So good.
You know, but a lot of the time, so like we had a client actually come in today who wanted to do a trade, and he had a gilt dial, a Submariner, and beautiful watch, and called it tropical, and it is brown, but it's not natural brown. You could tell, and he even admitted, you know, it's a combination of humidity and the elements getting into it. The dial was no longer glossy, it's matted out. You could see, you know, kind of pitting all around the dial. But it was a very cool looking watch, but not this.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was like I didn't even ask any of the other things with it. Like to me, the dial was everything. So you could have said it was polished and blah blah blah, and I would still have been like, great, done. And then you're like, oh, it's unpolished, it's all original, all there. I'm like, all right, yeah,
Yeah, even original crazed crystal, even original crazed crystal on it.
I asked you that after you sent me,
Right?
And then I was like, just for the heck of it, like, what is it? You're like, oh yeah, it's like actually perfect, and it is. Like that watch is incredible.
Yeah, for me to keep something like this these days, it has to be really unique and interesting, just because we get so many of them in and out the door. And for me, it just simply boils down to aesthetic. Do I actually love the look of the watch? Because even if this wasn't in perfect 10 out of 10 condition, like you said, the dial is what draws you in. So it could have had a polished case, and I probably still would have kept it. Yeah. But the fact that it's just completely untouched watch. So how's the experience been on the wrist? Where do you find yourself wearing this watch the most? Like everywhere. What occasions?
I mean, literally almost everywhere. But the coolest thing is like stuff like this. I mean, even more than than a vintage Daytona, which people know Daytonas, for the most part, you just see it and you're like, oh, that's a Daytona. These are about as casual as it gets. 1016, they made a good amount of them over a lot of time. It looks, people will think it's an Oyster Perpetual or something, maybe a little older, normal, whatever. And it's just a low-key way to be really cool. Then people will look and they'll be like, "Oh, the dial."
Good way to put it. Low-key way to be really cool.
No, and I like that. It's super cool. But then people will see the dial and they'll be like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And they'll be like, "Oh, it's tropical dial, blah blah blah." And they'll either look and go, "Whoa," or they'll go like, okay, cool, and it kind of like leaves it. So it's something that like is valuable to people that think it's cool, and then otherwise they just don't know, and that's actually wonderful.
It's funny because, since you convinced me to sell this, we at the same time had gotten what I consider to be the best Tudor Submariner in the world, of reference 7928 at least. Also caramel tropical, unpolished, perfect. Came out of a jewelry store out of Virginia, and this old lady found it like in a Goodwill type store. Love it. And I kept it for a while, but it just, I don't daily wear Submariners, so like I ended up selling it to a client, and we just recently bought it back today, actually, just came in today. Oh, well. And having them next to each other, see,
it's
like,
pretty cool.
It's, the two caramel colors. But this one also, because the finish on the dial of these 7928s was not a gloss lacquer, it was just matte. You could see, kind of the shine isn't the same, even though the color gradient is the same.
No, it's still it's still absolutely gorgeous.
They're both killer.
Killer. I mean, it's hard not to love that.
All right, so moving away from my Soro, I'm gonna put it on there throughout the rest of the film.
Please,
just to bring back the memories.
No,
we have almost the same wrist size, so I can wear it for a minute. Other Rolex in the box that is a recent pickup. Tell me about this. Tell me why you went. Well, I know why you went for it because they offered you one. Did you get this straight from the Crown?
No.
Okay, so tell us about it. Why you went for it? What you love about it? What it is?
So this was one of the watches that the hype train like picked up super early. I had a little bit of information on this a little bit before it was public because it was being launched at the Le Mans race, the 100th, which was 2 years ago.
Yeah, and so obviously what we're talking about is Rolex Daytona, the new off-catalog white gold Le Mans that released in 2023.
23, yeah.
It was delivering in 24, I think.
Yeah, and then they effectively deliver it for the year. I mean, a couple dealers have them, but the whole thing was, obviously, I tried to get this through the, every normal channel, and just because cars are easily my top thing. I mean, it's always been my thing. And I love Daytonas, and I have that 6241 Newman that
we talked about last time.
Has been on here, and that I love that to death, and I was thinking about buying another like a 6239 with a black or charcoal dial just to balance it out. But a mixture of this being just modern to where you can actually wear it really hard, and like modern Rolex, like they don't do a lot that's super super exciting, but their watches are easily the most robust of anything that I know of, period. I wear all my stuff doing whatever it was supposed to be meant to be done with. That's word.
I know what you're saying.
But,
you use them as intended.
I mean, I did 200 miles an hour in the 6241, and then I've done that with the 6702, like everything you're supposed to do with them, great. This one, I'm sure it won't be, any different. But anyways, I thought they were, obviously, secondary market prices were huge.
Massive. Yeah, prices
huge.
Were massive.
And, I watched them kind of go this, that, and the other, and then it discontinued for the white gold. And now they have the application piece yellow, which now has been going technically for a couple years, and they'll probably, keep it, who knows. But anyways, the white went out. And once it went like fully out, I have less of a thing with like paying a bigger number for something in that world when there aren't more being made.
Right.
And I mean, again, like
production's capped. So at some point, supply is cut off.
Yeah.
And, as long as demand stays relatively the same,
Yeah.
it should lead to a healthy, stable market.
Yeah. And even like, whatever happens within a year or 2 or 3 is kind of one thing. But the other is, and what I've learned from the collecting is, even if something seems really expensive, if it's really rare and it's already rare, what happens in 10 years, in 20 years? I mean, the numbers that the other Newmans are going for, Newmans are going for they're very high. They overall seem to keep going up over time. I mean, little things here and there. This is production-wise, they made for a year. They made a handful. Each store got 1 or 2.
Right.
I mean, maybe the biggest one in the world got 3. I don't know, but it's the kind of thing where I was like, whatever the price is now, whatever that trigger pull price is in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20, that's the rarest modern Rolex. That's a new movement, all new parts other than the bracelet. Right. Everything else is specific for this one, versus even like a dial on like the puzzle dial on the Day-Day.
Yeah.
That's I mean, the dial and the wheel is really cool. Aside from the graphics on the parts, they're the same.
Right.
This is unique to this watch. So the mixture of all of that, I was like, all right, I'll bite. I sold something else anyways, and I kind of wanted to pick something else up. And instead of doing the vintage, I ended up getting an offer from a friend of mine that worked out very well for both of us.
Mutually beneficial.
It was mutually beneficial. So it was like, all right, I've got to do this.
It's an interesting transition, actually, because one of the questions that was asked to me about you after our first video, because we were talking about some of the pieces that you'd gotten directly from the manufacturer and how you're able to customize them. Somebody asked me, I mean, how does a guy like that, start building, or how does a person in general, and it was directed after our video, start building that relationship with a brand? What do you have to do to start getting watches like that? So I wanted to ask you about your journey with the next brand we're going to talk about, the 2 other watches you have here. Before we get to that, what has your relationship been with Rolex over the years, and how hard did you try to get this from them, and what was like the feedback like, because you've been around for a while, you've been collecting for a while, you have great relationships. I think you're one of the best people I know at building solid relationships and going to the events and putting in the time, and even you couldn't get this watch.
No. I mean, honestly though, these were tough because when a Rolex AD only gets 1 or 2 of something, and you're not the person that spent an unbelievable amount of money. And I mean, in the watch world, there are other companies that, have spent plenty of money, but that's only from AD money, so to speak.
Right.
So when you get something like these, effectively it ends up going to whoever has, whoever spent that money, or the person that owns the AD is just kind of like, all right, this is going to be the one thing that I actually keep. And I get that. With this watch, I 100% get it.
Right.
However, like for the yellow gold one, for application piece stuff, I mean, honestly, for Rolex, I really do think at the end of the day, it just ends up being spending money. And that's really for them. Not to say that you can't have a very special relationship with a lot of owners there, but for the pieces that are like that seems to be it.
When was the last time you bought a brand new Rolex from an AD or from Rolex?
They have been actually 2 Daytonas, both Oyster Flex.
Okay.
I still love them. For a modern watch that you can wear all the time and they're super cool, it's still my favorite of that. But I've definitely shied away from a lot of new Rolex is phenomenal as a watch is concerned, as far as like you can wear them, you can beat them, you can do everything. But I don't need to have a Pepsi, a Bruce Wayne, a blah, 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 a lot of the same kind of modern stuff.
Right.
I wouldn't mind a Bruce Wayne, but that really is just like it's a really nice, cool watch to go around with, not something that I'm like, I wouldn't be like, oh, this is, check this thing out.
So let's move into this final brand of 2 watches you brought. I know this was your first piece by them. We are talking about F.P. Journe, and I know you recently, within the past, let's say, 12 months, got into the brand, like started really participating and getting part of the community. How has that been like? Because people have asked me, like, what do you have to do to get a Journe these days? And I'm like, listen, I really don't, you can't walk in and get a black label, but as a new client, you can walk in and request stuff, but they're not going to give it to you if you're just walking in trying to throw it on your credit card. I think they want to see that you actually have a vested interest in the brand.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So how has the process been like? What was it like getting this first allocation? Tell us about the watches. Tell us about the one on your wrist.
Yeah.
That I have a very. We'll talk about that as we get there. But tell us about the first watch they allocated you.
So actually, my relationship with them started about 5 years ago.
Okay.
But it started at the LA boutique, and 5 years ago was, I mean, literally pre-COVID. Things were definitely heating up for them pretty well, but you really could still go in, talk to someone, say what you wanted, a little bit of this and that and the other, and you'd actually kind of get into that realm. So I did that in LA with who's still a friend of mine, but I did it around then, and then a few years later he left. And then when he left, that
went away.
Now his sister is still there, and again, I like, you guys will see this. I love you guys both, but when he left, it was one of those like, oh dang, and I kind of just
there goes the plug.
Not gave up, but it was one of those like, okay, I waited for a few years, that didn't pan out, but then last year or 2 years ago with Mark Margulies, like we, was doing the collab, the strap that I ended up having to show, and I think that got shown here at least on one thing. We're doing that, and he was like, come to the Journe stuff. Like, there's an event, like, you should come. Sure, hell yeah, I love it. And I went, and it was one of these, like, I really met all sorts of people that I, like, fell in love with, so to speak. Like, there's something really special about the group that is around Miami in particular, and with Journe. So it was one of these, like, I had already appreciated the watches. It's hard to not appreciate them. But for me, the watches are incredibly important. The people are arguably more important at the end of the day. But the passion that the people have for the watches, and then for other people that have the same passion, that the Journe community in particular has been, especially here, and honestly, LA too. I've met some really good friends that are now really good friends from the LA boutique, right? Because I'm around both those places. But anyways, so from spending that time over the past like couple years with the people in that boutique, I was introduced to Issa at Journe, and it was one of these, like, she was like, all right, so what's on your, what's on your list? And I was like, well, this was on it. And she's kind of looking, and she's like, well, it's not there. I'm like, well, it's because he left, and it was, this, that, the other. And she's like, okay, now let's figure out what's on your list. And this was after, knowing for a bit, admittedly, a lot of reference. Like, I think for them, having a lot of other enthusiasts that are like, oh yeah, this is like, this guy actually loves watches, loves the events, loves the people. That mix to them is really, really, really important.
So would you say that's like a critical component to like getting them to give you a watch?
It's huge.
Going to the events, participating, talking to them.
Yeah, and also, it's specifically showing nerdiness, and not like the, not in the sense of like, well, I'd love this because this, this would be just super cool and I can brag to, it means zero to them that
knowing about their watches.
That is nothing.
Right.
Yes, but then, and then there's also, everyone has different levels of technical knowledge. Honestly, my technical knowledge, relatively speaking, in this watch world is a 3 out of 10 compared to most other people. But there's, the mixture of, I love engines for anything, obviously, coming from, car world. So there's a mechanical aspect that I obviously appreciate. There's an aesthetic aspect that I'm hugely appreciative to, especially as I start doing more and more design stuff. Right. And then there's also a value aspect. And by value, I don't mean like how much is something worth, but what you're getting in something. Because so many companies are raising their prices for things so high that you start to think like, okay, is this really, really, really worth it? And Richard Mille has been one of the companies that, like, people say, well, is something worth it? And it's always hard to describe.
Argument.
It's always hard to describe worth, but for me, and like for the 6702, to a degree, the answer is yes, because that's a watch that I can drop on a floor. I can be in car. You can literally beat that thing around more than any other watch at all. Right. It is the ultimate sport watch. And relatively speaking, for the number I paid for it, back in 2018, then I can make a rationalization for it. It's still unearthly expensive in the scheme of things, but there really aren't many watches that can do that. So going to Journe, they offer some of the highest quality in one of the most value, like MSRP retail value for them. And
they've been going up steadily. Like, we're going to get to that in a second with the watch on your wrist.
Yeah.
So how did you decide on, was 40 millimeter platinum octa?
So it's a automatique, so their AN is the new reference for this, but it's effectively the new RDM, the new Reserve de Marche.
Sure.
And for me, I actually remember seeing these back in the early 2000s when I was I mean, teens.
Okay.
And I remember seeing, because I was already into watches when I was like 8, because my mother would, like I said, would, you know, drag me into these jewelry stores. And I remember seeing this design very clearly because it was just such an interesting asymmetrical, you know, dial. And it was one of these, like, as a kid, you're like, why is that so small? It looks weird. And, but it kind of sticks with you too. And that, to me, like when I first learned about Journe, back when, at that time, Godberg, which is where I was at, I mean, they were very early ADs for Journe.
Yep.
And they, you know, they had built, so I was able to see a lot of this stuff for, you know, for years. And this style was the one that I just remember.
Candidly, was this the watch you asked them for, or was this what they offered you as your first watch?
I asked.
Okay, great. So you were able to successfully get, and what would you say for everybody who wants to start a relationship and try to get Journe from Journe and not on the secondary market? What's the best approach then? To go out and ask exactly for what you want, or, you know, talk to them first, go to the events, you know, explain, you know, what your prerogative is.
Yeah.
Like, what's the best approach? What approach work for you?
I mean, just being pretty straightforward is about it, because there are some things that, like, obviously people will always want. Right. I mean, like this watch is, you know, one of the, you know,
crazy.
For them,
it's like one of their cheaper watches and you can't get it.
The everyone thing, the Elegant is another one that, you know, pretty much everyone, you know, at the end of the day, you know, asks for. But I think that the whole thing is, maybe aside from this and aside from the Elegant, to obviously, I mean, ask for something in the classic series. Right. Or actually, that's not the sport series too, actually. You can really ask for any of them. It's just, have it be who you are, like what you actually like at that point. As long as you can't do a black label until you've had multiple mechanical watches from multiple.
So don't walk in and ask for a resonance or a tourbillon right out the gate, you know, or
you know, it's interesting. I feel like if you're a turb guy and you have tourbillons of other brands,
right,
and that's really your thing, honestly, I think you absolutely could.
Right.
I think you could go and say, hey, this is what I love collecting. This is what I would love to, you know, to have. And I feel like that kind of thing works, but it really depends on other stuff you have.
Right.
You know, that's really that.
Yeah. It's funny seeing that watchers. You've heard this story before, but I'll tell it for everybody who hasn't heard it. So before I was a watch dealer many, many moon ago, when I lived overseas in Russia in particular, one of these popped up. And so what's on his wrist right now is probably my favorite watch from Journe, and is one of the simplest. Chronometer blue, so tantalum with this watch will get some B-roll of it. We'll still never photograph or video how special it is in person. But one of these popped up from a secondhand store in Russia. Mm-hmm. They called them Lombards, which technically translates to pawn shop, even though they're not pawn shops. You know, they're just gray market dealers.
Yeah.
And it popped up, no box, no papers, $11,000.
Yep.
Now, at the time, the retail price, I think, was like $18,000 and change plus tax. So, like, you're right in around like $21,000. So, I, you know, being a fan of the brand, and no one cared about Journe at the time, and I loved the watch, ran and bought it. Gave my credit card, figured out later. Here's my credit. Yeah. And I emailed Journe at the time, and I said, hey, listen, I just bought this watch overseas. I was wondering if I could buy from you a box and a certificate if you guys do anything like that, like an extract a tech does or something. And they were so ecstatic that I bought the watch, that I was into the brand. Because again, this was at a time where not a lot of people knew about them, not a lot of people cared, that they provided me a box and a certificate signed by Francois Journe for free.
Oh my God, I love
Sent it to me, everything. For free, absolutely gratis. And I loved the watch, enjoyed the watch for many, many years, and then ended up selling it to fund a vintage Blancpain 50 Fathoms. Absolutely regret it. Yep. But I remember, you know, back when the boutique was in the Bell Harbor shops and not downtown where it is now. Before they moved, I would go in there and I would sit down with the employees. They don't work there anymore, the people back then. No one would, I'd sit there for an hour. We'd have a glass of champagne. No one would walk in.
I did the same.
You could see any watch. Everything was for sale. I remember one time specifically, they're like, hey, we just got a new Jade tourbillon and you want to see it? I'm like, yeah, pull it out. And so, like, they, you know, everything was accessible. And they were so enthusiastic, and I'm not saying they aren't now, but times have surely changed. And I've always wanted to rebuy this watch for myself. And I remember they crept up to like 25 and 30, and you could watch the trajectory. You sign up for European Watches newsletters. Because they would get like one a month, and every month the price would just creep up a little. And I'm like, I should just buy one before they keep going up. And I'm like, oh, they're not good. They can't go up. How much higher can they go when they're at like 30 grand and the retail is still low 20s? And it just kept going up and up. And now I think the retail on this, what's the retail on this? Do you know?
I think it's mid-40s.
So plus tax, you're almost at like 50 grand.
Yeah.
And the secondary market is in what, that 80 to 100 range?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I mean, listen, for me, the watch is deserving. I just remember when I owned it, $11,000, you know, so.
I know. I mean, I watched them go up, you know, the same way. And I remember a couple of years ago, I was interested in one, and I was like, you know, what is it? I asked, you know.
So this one you did not get from them.
So no, this one I did not get from them. I did request it, but
like everybody else.
I did, of course. But it was one of the watches that I was like, you know what? I want it so badly that I want to make sure that I actually have one, because part of the thing that's been interesting, especially with this watch, just as far as my preferences, I mean, it's as simple as it gets, but dark metals are my thing. I mean, dark metals or ceramics or composites or whatever. I mean, I love that. It's the only one that they do in tantalum. It's the only one that has a little bit of that, like, not mysterious, but like you see the metal and you're like, that's rich for a different reason. It's the
right.
It's got depth to it. It's just really cool. You know, works on all sorts of straps. And when you look at so many of the other independents that people are going wild for,
right?
It's the simple, you know, the simple models. They
bring
don't
it
have
back to basics,
they don't have a lot of the, you know, it's not a Patek Grand Comp. It's the, you know, Regeff's CC2 is a very masterfully done watch, but it's a very simple aesthetic.
Yep.
This is really, to me, that kind of watch. And I was like, you know, watching the values kind of go where they're going, who knows what François Paul will do, because he does what he wants to do. And honestly, that's actually part of the fun of it too, because I don't know, it's a passion thing. So I understand that. So anyways, I wanted to make sure that I had one just in case I'm not able to get one over time, because it's still one of the most requested watches.
I know a mutual friend who has like 15 that he bought from them, and then had to still like remind Pierre, like, hey, I still want a CB, and he finally got it, but like it was not the first, not the second, not even like the 15th one.
Yeah. But so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna get one. I'm gonna get one secondhand. So I was able to get one, and this one has the deployant clasp, which honestly I love.
Right.
Not a lot of people do, but for me, this just makes it super, super wearable, and it's the only watch for them that's in 39 millimeter. The thing that would have me, I mean, I really would love if they would do something else in 38 or back to 39. That AN is a 40 millimeter,
right? And
it is super cool. I love it. I would love it maybe just a little bit more if it was 39. Right. But that's just for me, and it's a 7-inch. Yeah, I have a 7-inch wrist.
I had a friend named Alex who was supposed to get me one of these at retail. He promised me in front of people. He made a bet, and then of course he didn't come through on it. And thank you, Alex.
Yeah, Alex.
And one day I'll own that watch again. At what price point, I don't know. But final thoughts. What's next on your Journe list? What's next in the watch world? Final thoughts before we cut this off.
For Journe, for me, aside from this, I have had the Black Dial Elegant on my list for a while, because for me that it's square in the middle of my aesthetic. Again, darker metal, darker dial. Fantastic. It really is.
Yeah.
Like I tried it. It's annoyingly good, and that's also a really cool travel watch.
Yeah.
Although honestly, this works incredibly well for that. So like if I want to have a cool watch and travel with it and not be too you know, showy or at risk, these are still, I think, pretty good ways to do it.
Journe's still enough under the radar, although it's slowly but surely changing. People are starting to understand the brand, and it's more recognizable as the popularity continues to grow and grow and grow.
They are. So, but as far as new things, when they come out with the new sport model, which goes back to the 42 millimeter case versus the current 44 millimeter case, I know the metal's changing, or the composite is changing, you know, all sorts of stuff changing, but I really like the aesthetic of it. That I will be asking for. And then otherwise, what I'm doing will end up being situating myself so then I can ask for a black label.
Okay.
But if I do a black label, it would be maybe a CS. I like the more classic form of that.
Nice.
In for the black label. I really enjoy that. If they were to come out with a 38 or 39, again, this is more futures than specifically what's on there.
Right.
But if they were to come out with a resonance in 38 or 39, if they were to do, you know,
you have to fight a lot of people to get that watch.
Oh, 100%. You know, that's interesting. What I would love more than anything, though, is the Tokyo chrono that they just come out with, the limited Tokyo, if they do that in any other metal that's not limited and still, you know, can be what it is, but 40 millimeter, I tried that watch on a bit ago, and 3 of my friends, I think, managed to get them. And I tried it on, and that may be, I mean, I'm a chronograph guy. That is my ultimate what they could do, you know, for me. And I have definitely chirped it in, you know, everyone's ear there, and it doesn't matter what I say.
And Journe is listening.
But it's one of those where I'm like,
you know what he wants.
Like, I really, you know, I really do. That's one that, you know, that would be there.
Well, you've done some awesome pickups, awesome damage in the past year since we last sat down together. Dude, congrats. And sell me back the Explorer when it's time.
Oh, yeah.
One day. One day.
If ever.
Yeah. Well,
you can take it off my wrist if I'm...
I got to find you something better. And then...
It's going to be hard.
It really will be for that one.
No, I mean, that one really is. But anyways, no, I'm sure at some point.
Thank you, bro. Anyways, guys, that's about all the time we have here today. I hope you guys enjoyed our sit-down chat with Drew here. Again, give him a follow on Instagram. Always very entertaining content when it comes to cars, watches, restaurants, everything in between. He's a fantastic human to keep track of online. Thanks, as always, for watching. If you can, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, anything you can do to help us out. And we'll see you guys next week on the next video. Bye.